When was the last time you thought for the sake of thinking? I believe it happens much more rarely than we'd expect. Most of the time when you think, it's to achieve a goal, whether it's responding to a question or solving a problem. But I suggest thinking recreationally without explicit purpose because you never know where you'll end up. It's great to do if you're bored or you can't sleep. I mean, if you're going to lay awake for hours, you might as well entertain yourself amid the struggle. Insomnia can be a nightmare, which is a little insultingly ironic if you think about it. I would guess insomniacs would rather have nightmares if it meant they could get to sleep at a reasonable hour. It's like saying starvation is high in carbs. I did some recreational thinking recently and ended up comparing abortion to vigilantism because can't stop, won't stop. I think the entire idea of abortion being a women's rights issue is a smokescreen to make the guilt of terminating pregnancy harder to find. It's a real smart angle because it paints the aborters as the victims whose rights need to be protected. These women have mistakenly placed themselves or have been placed on the path to motherhood before they were ready, though every parent in the world will tell you there's never a perfect time and you're never truly ready, but so you must pity their predicament and support any means of alleviating it, or else be labeled incompassionate and probably misogynistic. Were any compassion saved for the fetuses being ripped apart, however, you'd have women feeling immense guilt and trepidation for what they might decide to do. And some of them do feel that and refuse to go through with it. But those who would seek to protect abortion as an institution of childless redemption clearly see the benefit of indoctrinating young women into viewing it not as the killing of the unborn, but the liberation of women's freedom. People celebrate abortions as a woman's right to choose, while simultaneously preventing potential little girls from ever being able to choose anything. So how does this relate to vigilantism? Well, I'm specifically referring to the TV show Dexter. If you're unfamiliar, Dexter is a show about a serial killer who only kills other killers. He is a blood spatter analyst for a police department, and when cases slip through the cracks, he makes sure the criminals involved face his own brand of methodical, murderous justice. But Dexter Morgan is no altruist. He finds targets to satiate his own killing compulsions. He's addicted, he feels the hunger, and only through a code established to honor his father does he channel his bloodlust into targeted comeuppance. The point is, Dexter is a psychopathic serial killer, and the show goes out of its way to make him sympathetic as a victim of early childhood trauma that paved the way for his monstrous instincts. Is the parallel a little clearer? Now, certainly no women are addicted to abortions, and I'm far from suggesting they're psychopaths, although the women behind the whole laugh at your abortion movement just might be. The psychology is different, but the justifications are the same. You have the life taker, portrayed as the victim and applauded for their actions, empowering them. Some would call Dexter a hero. After all, it's an objective benefit to society to take serial killers off the streets, whether they end up in prison or the bottom of the harbor, and by the same token, preventing another life from entering the world doesn't add to our population problem and subtracts another mouth to feed. It saves money and resources and space on the planet. You can dress both things up as the most noble acts in the world committed by self-described marginalized groups, and thus repel criticism as immoral or oppressive. When you see it that way, it starts to look a lot more typical of your garden variety far-left MO. Denounce all opposition as ignorance or intolerance, and steamroll everyone with your supposed virtue. Being white's kind of a pain now. You like how you can't say that without people immediately interpreting it as sarcastic? Oh, we got our problems. Maybe they don't match the weight of other groups' problems, but I ain't about to let you dismiss them out of existence. Our opinions have gone out of style. That's really something, that culture can shift so dramatically from disregarding one race's viewpoints to another. Because who was it before us in America? Black people, right? Pre-civil rights movement. White people didn't care what they had to say, as far as what school has taught me. We didn't even want to share their drinking fountains. Whenever they got in a pool, we poured bleach in it to get them the fuck out, and God forbid one of them whistled at us. So we all agree that black people had it pretty bad for a while in America. That distinction is important, because I think when people are making generalizations about the supposed virtue or evil of certain races, they're really not taking the rest of the world into account. Let's say you're white and you think white people deserve whatever's coming to them. This is not an outlier opinion. I talked to somebody 2 days ago who basically pulls down his pants because he's so ready for God to spank his white ass. When will the white race get what it deserves? But what about the whites that are minorities in other countries? What did they do? Are the white people who live in Japan evil and oppressive dominators too? There's this uniquely American anti-white sentiment from white people breeding in the States, and maybe it's happening in other predominantly white countries. If you're watching this and you're from one, you can maybe attest to it. But it isn't logical, because it accuses us of hoarding power in our pasty majority, but it applies to white minorities too. You don't see anyone clamoring for white representation in Bollywood or foreign movies, where white people aren't exactly taking up every seat at the table. This is what proves to me that it's just racism, because your whole "you can't be racist against the dominant race" bullshit falls apart when you continue to disparage the white people that aren't dominant. Also, the dominant race in terms of population would be Chinese people, but if you went to China as a white person and said shit about them, you'd get called racist anyway. Where's the consistency? I'm not advocating in favor of saying shit about any race. I'm just so tired of white people being the exception to every racist rule in the book. Don't make fun of people for their race unless they're white. Don't belittle anyone's experience or point of view unless they're white. Don't hate people for the way they were born unless they were born white. Do you think someone's a bad person? Are they white? Well, that definitely has something to do with it then. Discrediting white people because they're white is applauded. You see it on Twitter all the time, with celebrities making fun of white people they don't like by calling them white, followed by whatever their actual problem is. Race has nothing to do with individuality, unless they're white, of course, then it's the catalyst for all their bad behavior. People are more than just the color of their skin, unless they're white. Everything they do that's good is because they're a good person, and everything they do that's bad is because they're white. Are you starting to get annoyed? Now you know how I feel. Anti-white white people have the audacity to invite their own demise. They talk about white genocide like they deserve it, as if after 2 billion people were wiped out, you'd be like, now we're even. I saw a comedian tweet about the Brett Kavanaugh stuff, like, for what it's worth, when the armed uprising portion of the women's revolution begins, I want whoever kills me to know that I totally get it. Not even mad. This is obviously about gender, not race, but the sentiment crosses over, and it's so fucking twistedly disgusting. You might say it's a joke, but the replies treat the idea seriously, and the dudes in there commenting back seriously, yeah, I'm sorry for the group I was born into. Presumably this guy is against Kavanaugh, which it's fine to be against Kavanaugh. My last episode is a defense of the presumption of innocence more than him as a person, but despite that, this guy's still willing to shoulder blame on behalf of his gender, which is the same stance many fucking insane white people take on behalf of their race. Yeah, I didn't practice slavery myself, or start the Holocaust, or do anything you're mad at my race for, but if you want to kill me to feel better, go right ahead, I understand. If there ever was an armed revolution against white people, these guys would turn themselves in for execution even though they didn't do anything. I don't see how anyone can not have a deep, fundamental problem with a mentality that volunteers for self-genocide. It's sick, it's deranged, and it's popular. It would be like Jews serving themselves up for the Holocaust. If you're gonna refer to someone as white when talking about them, you better be drawing a police sketch or giving background on a blind date. Because if a dude is in a Senate hearing denying sexual assault, and in your brave takedown of him on Twitter, you use his race as a springboard for your disgust with him, you're being fucking racist. Look at this straight white piece of shit. He's a monster. But if I was talking about Bill Cosby, like, look at this black rapist trash, everyone would be like, wow, that's racist. Him being black has nothing to do with it. Cool, can I record you saying that and play it back for you whenever you're being a raging hypocrite? This isn't some soapbox where I'm like, white people are the real victims here, we're the ones being oppressed, although being barred from participating in any real conversations according to a particular ideology that wants us to permanently shut up about all issues does strike me as oppression-minded. I got into an argument on Facebook with a previous high school classmate of mine because he posted a status calling everyone who didn't fully support Brett Kavanaugh's accuser and played devil's advocate a racist, sexist, or misogynist. That's right, racist was thrown in there for God only knows why. And that's the kind of shit you can't just let slide. It had like 25 likes and hearts, nobody had commented or made an angry emoji face, so somebody had to step up and refuse to tolerate blanketly demonized labels of an entire perspective just for still placing value on the importance of evidence. By the way, the term devil's advocate there is misleading and dismissive because it implies Kavanaugh is automatically the devil, when he could still very well be innocent. Using it there means you've accepted your own belief as fact prior to any conclusion being drawn. It makes you a willfully arrogant idiot. So in response to an opposing perspective, he immediately drew attention to the fact that I was a straight white cis male, as if me being gay or Mexican or transgender would have given me the proper credentials to weigh in, even though none of those things have shit to do with the situation. Imagine hearing this. As a Mexican, I believe Dr. Ford. Pfft, the fuck? As a transgender asexual, I think Kavanaugh is lying. As an Asian immigrant from Thailand, I don't speak English. The conversation quickly devolved into an accusatory mess of petty defamation because that's what happens when one side doesn't think the other side is even human because of your political differences. Other people joined in, calling Republicans the party of Nazis, and one white guy blamed white people for literally all of history and said he would wholeheartedly support any consequences that might be in store for them. It's absolutely appalling, and it's celebrated in their circles. I am a logic hound, and I am sensitive to hypocrisy when people aren't aware they're practicing it. From my experiences and my digestion of news, nobody pushes my buttons like the far left, so I understand if I come off as partisan or even full-blown conservative. I promise you it's nothing more than a selfish pursuit of coherence. Hell, if you've noticed any blatant political hypocrisy examples coming from other ideologies, shout them out. Maybe I'll agree with you and they can piss us off together. It's also worth noting that I am still in year one politics after decades of disregard. Not that I purport to have any sway over your beliefs, but right now my political stylings don't really go beyond getting mad at shit, which isn't helpful. But I'm not trying to be helpful, just self-indulgent and cathartic. Even as I grew up apolitical, I always went through life assuming the Democrats were the good guys, and anything they fought for must be just and good, and who were these Republicans to stand in the way of progress and all that bullshit? Obama was good, Bush was bad, and otherwise I paid zero attention. And when you pay zero attention, you have no reason to challenge your initial assertions that are carrying you through this apathy. That's a bubble like any other, even if you don't do anything in it. So if you're still apathetic about politics like I was, just know that your base assumptions about it are probably wrong and definitely ignorant. And whether you realize it or not, they're going to inform certain biases you develop, which will indoctrinate you in some ways you can't even detect until you start exploring your beliefs. Sleeper agents don't know they're sleeper agents until they hear the magic words. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and you can support the channel monthly on Patreon at patreon.com/sunburnedalbino, and I'll see you guys next time.